Hey guys, Oliver here, and I've got another tutorial for you, this time creating snowy or wintry scenes. So I finally got my hands on the new Hoth Luke Skywalker figure. I picked him up off Bricklink since I wasn't too interested in the rest of the set he comes in, and he's fairly cheap anyways. The shot I'm going for today is going to be a combination of two previous shots of mine, the first being this shot that I made a behind the scenes video on a while ago, and this shot right here, basically just trying to create a snowy forest with trees. For obvious reasons, I create all my snowy scenes using a white surface, and here I'm just using the lid to a storage container I have. So I came up with a rough skeleton of the shot I want with these trees here that I'm gonna essentially build my scene around, and I ended up using some pretty questionable methods to get these trees to stand up straight, but you gotta do what you gotta do. Alright, so these are the three most essential tools for creating snowy scenes. First up we have baking soda / powder, which is going to serve as the actual snow. Some people like to use flour, but personally I prefer this as it's easier to work with and looks more realistic in my opinion. Next up we have this strainer, which is key to lightly layering the baking soda to manipulate the snow in a much more controlled manner. And finally we have this small brush for micro adjustments to add or remove really small amounts of powder to really perfect the scene and add just a hint of detail. Alrighty, so now it's time to get started with adding our snow and spreading it out appropriately throughout our scene. I typically use the strainer at the end to add a thin layer that covers up any noticeable areas in which I moved a particular pile of baking soda around. The strainer really comes in handy for lightly covering rocks with a bit of snow without completely covering them. I didn't film it, but I used the strainer to lightly cover Luke with a bit of snow just to make it look like snow is falling on him and catching on his jacket and head, and just to make him feel like a part of the scene. Over here I'm using my brush to pick up a small amount of baking soda to cover this really tiny rock and be as precise as possible. Okay, the scene is coming together nicely. I might add a couple more elements in the background, but this is basically the final setup. As far as cleanup is concerned, I try to save and reuse as much baking soda as possible, and luckily the nice thing about using it is that it comes off pretty easily from these sticks and rocks. And arguably the fourth most important tool for snowy shots is a credit card of sorts, as it makes it super easy to quickly gather all the powder and pour it back in the jar really efficiently. So this is the raw shot we came out with. Honestly not the greatest, but hopefully after a couple adjustments in Photoshop and Lightroom we can make this thing really stand out. So we're here in Photoshop, and the two elements we're going to be adding in are falling snow and a lightsaber glow effect. I have a couple falling snow overlays, and I'm going to be using this one in particular, but I'm going to be duplicating it and placing a copy of this layer in the background to give more depth and really sell the effect. Obviously the snow particles will be smaller since it's farther away, and I'm going to be giving it an appropriate blur as well, in addition to obviously erasing any part that's overlapping the trees in the foreground. And then I'm just going to re-add the original layer of falling snow in the foreground and make a couple adjustments to the opacity and focus, and maybe just thin it out a bit here and there. Lastly, I created this lightsaber effect as well as a little bit of blue glow on Luke's side and the ground around his lightsaber. For those that are interested, there are a number of great tutorials out there that give a step-by-step walkthrough on exactly how to do this, but I didn't bother to include how I did it because it's a bit long and boring honestly. Alrighty, so now we're in Lightroom, and the first thing we're going to do is crop the image a bit, as I didn't really fill out the sides of the shot when I was creating my scene. Apart from that, I just kept the editing really minimal and only increased the contrast and adjusted the temperature a little bit. I did add a slight vignette because why not, and then I added my signature bit of clarity on Luke's face to sharpen the focus just a bit. And this is the final shot. I wish I added a hint more detail in the immediate foreground as well as maybe another tree or two in the distance, but I'm relatively pleased with how this turned out. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.